Welcome back to the Ancestral Findings podcast. Today I'm looking back on last month. Last month was one of those good, steady months in family history where I didn't uncover some huge surprise, but I still got a lot done. I didn't add a long line of new names just to make the tree bigger. I didn't solve every question that's been sitting there waiting on me either. But I did make real progress, and when I look back on it now, I can see that the kind of progress I made is the kind that helps later. I spent most of my time working on one family line instead of bouncing all over the place. That alone helped a lot. When I let myself drift from one branch to another, it's easy to end up with a pile of notes, too many open tabs, and not much that feels settled. Last month, I wanted to be more careful than that. I wanted to stay with one line, look at it closely, and really see what I had, what I still needed, and what I may have assumed too quickly before. That turned out to be a good way to spend the month. By the end of it, I hadn't finished every single thing I wanted to finish, but I knew that line better than I did when the month began. I had a clearer view of the people in it. I had a better sense of which records were helping me and which ones were raising new questions. I also had a much better idea of what I want to do next. That's a solid month of family history work in my book. One of the best things I did last month was choose one line and stick with it. That may sound basic, but it really does help. It's very easy in this kind of research to get pulled in 10 directions at once. You may start out looking for one person in a census, and before long, you're checking a marriage record for somebody else, reading about a county boundary change, comparing 3 people with the same name, and wondering whether a nearby family might connect somehow too. I've done that more times than I can count. Sometimes it leads somewhere useful, but sometimes it just leaves me with scattered research and a lot of unfinished thinking. Last month I wanted to work differently. I picked one family line that needed attention and kept bringing myself back to it every time I was tempted to wander too far away. That helped me more than I expected. It gave the month a clear purpose. It also made my notes cleaner because everything was tied to the same main question. Instead of trying to do a little on 6 different lines, I was able to do deeper work on one. There's something satisfying about that. Even when you don't solve everything, you come away feeling like you truly spent time with the family instead of just passing through. A big part of last month was not searching for brand new records. A big part of it was going back through records I already had and reading them more carefully. And that's one of those things I think all of us need to do more often. It's easy to get excited about finding something new. It's not always as exciting to go back and study something you saved a year ago, but sometimes that second or third look is where you finally see what you missed the first time. I went back through census records, marriage records, death records, cemetery information, and old notes I had already collected on this line. Some of those records I knew well. Others I had saved and only half studied. I was glad I took the time to go back through them because I found several places where I needed to slow down and think more carefully. In some cases, I noticed details that didn't line up quite as neatly as I had once believed. In other places, I realized I had accepted something because it looked right at the time, but I hadn't really built a strong case for it. There were also a few records where I had only pulled out the most obvious detail and moved on, when there was more there that I should have paid attention to. That was one of the bigger accomplishments of the month. I didn't just gather information. I used the information I already had more wisely. This may have been the most useful thing I did all month. I spent time separating what I know from what I think, what I suspect, and what I may have carried forward from older research without enough proof. That's not always comfortable. Sometimes we all have parts of our tree that have been sitting there so long they start to feel settled, even if the evidence under them is thinner than it should be. A relationship gets entered into the tree, then repeated in notes, then seen in another person's tree, and after a while, it starts to feel established. But when you stop and ask, what really proves this? The answer isn't always as strong as you'd like. I ran into that last month. I had at least one connection on this line that seemed reasonable on the surface. The names fit, the place fits, the time period fits well enough. But when I started looking at it more carefully, I had to admit that I had leaned on possibility more than proof. That doesn't mean the connection is wrong. It means I need more before I treat it as settled. I think that kind of honesty is important in family history. It's better to leave a question open than to close it too quickly just because the answer feels convenient. Last month helped me clean up my thinking there. I marked some things as proven. I marked other things as still open. And in a few places, I had to admit that I needed to back up and take another look. That may not sound dramatic, but it's important work. A tree gets stronger when we're willing to be honest about what still needs proving. I spent a lot of time on census records last month, and it was well spent. Census work can be easy to rush through if you're only looking for a name and an age, but there's usually more there if you're willing to stay with it. I wasn't just looking at one census and calling it done. I was trying to follow the household across time. I wanted to see how the family changed from one decade to the next. I wanted to see who stayed nearby, which children appeared where they should, which ones seemed harder to track, and whether the broader pattern supported the conclusions I had carried in my tree. That kind of comparison helped quite a bit. Looking at a family in just 1 year can give you one picture. Looking at them over several census years gives you a much fuller one. It can show movement, changes in household size, possible losses, remarriages, grown children, and neighbors who keep showing up close by. That wider view helped me see that one person I had attached to the family didn't fit quite as cleanly as I once thought. Nothing in the census alone gave me a final answer, but several small points made me more cautious. Age reporting shifted a bit. Placement in relation to the household raised a question, and when I compared one census to another, the pattern just didn't feel as neat as I had once assumed. That was useful. I'd rather have a cautious, honest question than a tidy answer built on weak footing. Anybody who's done family history for long has run into this problem. You've got two people with the same name, living in the same general place around the same time, and the records start blending together if you aren't careful. That was one of my big challenges last month. I was working with two men who shared the same name in the same region, and for a while the records had been too easy to mix together. At first glance, some of them looked like they could belong to either man. That's where mistakes start. Once one wrong record gets attached, it can pull other wrong conclusions in with it. So I slowed down and started pulling the records apart more carefully. I made note of ages, wives, children, locations, neighbors, and anything else that might help distinguish one man from the other. I looked at where each one showed up over time. I paid attention to who was living nearby. I compared family groupings and watched for patterns that stayed consistent. By the end of the month, that picture was a lot cleaner. I'm not saying every last detail is settled, but I'm far less confused than I was before. I can now see much more clearly which records likely belong to one man and which belong to the other. That's a good accomplishment because it doesn't just help with one record. It helps with everything that depends on that record later. Once you untangle two people like that, the whole line begins to make more sense. One thing that helped me last month was paying closer attention to the people around the family, not just the direct line itself. I've learned over time that an ancestor rarely stands alone in the records. There are often neighbors, witnesses, in-laws, cemetery connections, church connections, and other families that keep appearing nearby. Sometimes the answer you're looking for isn't sitting directly in the record of the person you care most about. Sometimes it shows up in the people around them. That happened more than once last month. I started noticing a few surnames that kept turning up close to this family. At first, I didn't think much of it. Then I saw one of those names again as a witness. Then again in a nearby household. Then again in a cemetery listing connected to the same area. After a while, it stopped looking accidental. I don't have every piece of that figured out yet, but I do know those surrounding families deserve more attention now. They may help answer one of the open questions I still have, especially where I'm trying to sort out connections that aren't fully proven yet. This kind of research can take time, but it's often worth it. Families lived near people they knew. They married into nearby lines. They appeared in the same circles over and over again. When I pay attention to that wider community, I usually end up understanding my own line better. Last month reminded me of that again. I also spent some time last month checking my work against online trees, and that ended up being a good reminder about how careful we need to be with them. Online trees can be useful. I've found clues in them before. They can point to records I haven't seen or suggest a place I need to search next. But they can also spread a weak conclusion very quickly. A relationship gets copied enough times that it starts to look stronger than it really is. I ran into that problem last month, too. There was one connection on this line that showed up in multiple trees, and for a while that gave it an appearance of strength. But when I started looking into the actual records behind it, the support wasn't as solid as I'd hoped. It looked like the same idea may have been repeated over and over without enough evidence to hold it up. That was helpful to see. It reminded me not to treat repetition as proof. Just because something appears in many trees doesn't mean it's been carefully checked many times. Sometimes it just means one early guess traveled far. So I pulled back from that connection mentally and in my notes. I didn't throw it out. I just stopped treating it like something settled. That's a healthier place for it right now. I think that was one of the better accomplishments of the month, too. Not because I found a new answer, but because I became more careful about an old one. This may not be the most exciting part of the month, but it helped a lot. I cleaned up my notes. Good notes save time. Bad notes create confusion, and old notes that made sense at the time can become hard to follow later if they aren't clear enough. I've learned that the hard way more than once. Last month, I spent time organizing what I had on this line so I could actually use it better. I grouped material by person and family unit. I added source details where I had left them too thin. I wrote short summaries about what each record was telling me. I marked conflicts instead of pretending they weren't there. And I left myself better reminders about what still needs checking. That may sound like housekeeping, but it really does help. When I come back to this line later, I won't have to spend so much time trying to remember why I saved something or what question I had in mind when I looked at it. I'll be able to pick up and move forward. That's worth a lot. Sometimes a productive month is not just about discovery. Sometimes it's about putting your research into better shape so the next step can go more smoothly. That was part of last month for me, and I'm glad I took the time to do it. One thing I've come to appreciate in family history is that progress isn't always about answering a question. Sometimes progress is about understanding the question better. That definitely happened for me last month. At the beginning of the month, I had a few places on this line that felt uncertain in a broad kind of way. By the end of the month, those uncertainties were much more specific. I had narrowed them down. I knew which relationship needed stronger proof. I knew where a maiden name question was still weak. I knew where a same name issue had caused confusion. I knew which surrounding families might help next. That's real progress. I still have unanswered questions on this line. I still have one woman whose maiden name I'd like to prove with more confidence. I still have at least one relationship that needs stronger support before I'll feel comfortable settling it. I still have a few records I want to compare more carefully before I decide how certain I am about one branch. But now I know exactly where those weak points are. I'm not working in a fog anymore. I'm working with clearer targets. That's one reason I look back on last month as a productive month. I may not have solved every mystery, but I came away knowing what the real mysteries are, and that's an important difference. This was probably one of the quieter things I accomplished last month, but I think it helped me. I let go of the idea that every good month in family history has to end with a dramatic breakthrough. That's easy to expect sometimes. We all enjoy those exciting finds. We like the surprise record, the unexpected connection, the piece that suddenly pulls everything together. But if we expect that every time, we can miss the value of slower months. Last month was a slower month in the best sense. It was a month of sorting, comparing, checking, and tightening up the line. It was a month of clearing confusion. It was a month of learning to trust some conclusions more and hold others more loosely. That kind of month is important too. In fact, I think a lot of bigger breakthroughs only happen because of months like that. We prepare the ground, we learn more about the family, we separate people with the same name, we study the neighbors, We test the old assumptions. Then later, when a new record shows up, we're ready to understand it properly because we've already done the harder background work. So yes, I'd still love a big discovery every month. Who wouldn't? But last month reminded me that steady work has real value too. And usually it's that steady work that puts us in the best position when the next strong clue finally shows up. Now that a new month is underway, I've already got a pretty good idea of what I want to work on next. I'd like to keep going on this same family line while it's still fresh in my mind. I don't want to step away too soon and lose the momentum I built last month. There are still a few open questions here that deserve more time, and I think the best thing I can do is stay with them a little longer. One thing I want to spend more time on this month is the land and probate material connected to this family. If I can find the right deed, estate paper, or probate record, it may help answer one of the relationship questions that's still open. Those records can sometimes say what other records only hint at, especially when it comes to sorting children, in-laws, heirs, and nearby family ties. I also want to take a closer look at the surrounding families I mentioned earlier. A few surnames kept appearing close to this line last month, and I don't think that's something I should ignore. I want to see whether those repeated connections lead anywhere useful. Even if they don't answer the main question directly, they may help narrow the possibilities. Another thing on my list this month is to revisit a marriage connection that may help with a maiden name question I still haven't settled. I'm not ready to say I know the answer yet, but I do think there's more there to check. Sometimes the key isn't in the direct ancestors' records at all. Sometimes it's in a sibling, a witness, or another family tied into the same local circle. I'd also like to keep improving my notes as I go. I know myself well enough to know that if I don't keep that up, I'll regret it later. So part of this month's goal is not just to find more. It's to stay organized while I do it. Taking time to look back on what I accomplished last month has helped me see the work more clearly. If I had only judged the month by whether I found one huge answer, I might have said it was a quiet month and left it at that. But when I actually stop and think through it, I can see how much useful work got done. I stayed focused. I revisited records. I separated proven details from assumptions. I worked through a same-name problem. I paid more attention to neighbors and surrounding families. I became more cautious with copied information. I cleaned up my notes. And I ended the month with a clearer idea of what to do next. That's a good month. I think it's easy in family history to overlook progress because so much of the work is quiet. It happens in notes, comparisons, crossed-out ideas, and second looks at old records. It happens when a connection gets weaker, and you're honest enough to admit it. It happens when confusion starts to clear, even if a final answer still hasn't arrived. That kind of progress counts. In many ways, it's the kind that helps the most. If last month reminded me of anything, it's that a strong month in family history doesn't have to be flashy. It doesn't have to come with a big announcement. It doesn't have to push a line back another generation. Sometimes a strong month is one where the picture gets clearer, your notes get better, and your confidence in what you've got becomes more honest and more grounded. That's how I'd describe last month for me. I didn't finish everything. I didn't solve every open question, but I did strengthen this line. I did untangle some confusion. I did get clearer about where I need more proof. I did come away better prepared for what I want to work on next. And that's enough to make me feel good about the time I spent on it. Family history is often built in months like this, not always with one dramatic discovery, but with patient work that slowly clears the path ahead. That's what last month felt like for me. And as I move into this month, I'm thankful to be starting from a stronger place than I was before. That's what I accomplished last month in my family history. How did it go with you? If you've got a hard-to-find ancestor you're stuck on, I'd love to hear about it. Just head over to ancestralfindings.com and click on Contact to send me a message. While you're there, take advantage of our free weekly genealogy lookups. Explore thousands of articles, and enjoy hundreds of podcast episodes. We've been helping family history researchers since 1995. And if you're looking for even more, check out our Genealogy Gold Q&A series over on Patreon. Thanks for listening, and as always, happy searching.